There's a stranger designing your smile right now, and your dentist never mentioned it. After thousands of full arch cases, the single most consistent source of delays, cost overruns, and disappointing results traces back to the same structural decision, sending the work out. We're going to walk through what actually happens to a case once it leaves the office, why that model exists in the first place, and what goes wrong and why, what a different model looks like in practice, and the one question you need to ask before you choose where to be treated. Most patients assume the office handling their surgery is also the office designing their teeth. That feels reasonable. You're in one building, you see one team, you sign paperwork with one name on it. The outside lab model has been standard in dentistry for decades. For a long time, there was no practical alternative. The equipment to design and manufacture restorations in house didn't exist at the practice level. So the workflow became normal. The dentist places implants, takes scans, ships everything to a commercial lab, and waits. The technology changed. Digital design software, in-house milling machines, 3D printing capable of producing final restorations. All of it now exists at a price point practices can access. The workflow didn't have to stay the same. For most practices, it did anyway. The reason isn't capability. The reason is investment. Building a fully integrated digital manufacturing workflow inside a single practice requires significant capital, significant training, and a commitment of thousands of hours to master. Most practices look at that equation and decide the outside lab model is easier. That decision saves the practice time and overhead. It doesn't save you anything. This isn't about blaming practices that still use outside labs. Most of them are doing competent dentistry within the system they chose. The issue is the system itself creates problems for patients. And nobody's walking you through those problems before you sign a treatment plan. The practices that have made the investment to bring manufacturing in-house have fundamentally changed the accountability structure of your treatment. The same team that plans your surgery is also the team designing your teeth, producing your temporaries, and finishing your final restoration. There's no handoff. There's no outside party. When I performed this procedure on my own family members, including my grandfather at 94 and my mother-in-law, I was doing it inside the same integrated system that I use for every patient. The design, the manufacturing, the surgery, the follow-through, all of it, one place. Because when it's your family, you don't outsource the details. Once you understand that the outside lab model is a choice the practice makes and not a clinical requirement, you stop treating it as a neutral logistical fact. It's not neutral. We're going to look at exactly what it costs you. Next, we're going to follow what actually happens to your case once it leaves the office, step by step. Most patients assume that if there's an outside lab involved, it's a seamless back-end process, like shipping a package. It goes out, it comes back, everything fits, and the only thing you notice is a wait time. Practices rarely describe the outside lab relationship in detail during a consult. You'll hear something like, "We work with a trusted lab," and the conversation moves on. That framing makes it sound like a curated partnership. In most cases, it's a volume relationship with a commercial facility that processes cases from dozens or hundreds of practices at the same time. Your case isn't the only case at that lab. The technician working on your teeth has measurements from a scan. They don't have your face. They don't know how you smile, what your proportions look like in motion, how your lip line moves when you talk. They have numbers. Everything they build is an interpretation of numbers. Here's what happens when something's off. The teeth come back, they go in your mouth, something doesn't look right, or something doesn't fit correctly, or the bite isn't where it should be. The practice sends it back to the lab. The lab remakes or adjusts. The case ships again. This isn't a theoretical sequence. Patients in this situation have described it accurately. They're being volleyed back and forth between the office and a facility they've never seen, waiting weeks at a time, often in their temporary teeth longer than anyone planned. The people in this workflow aren't trying to create that experience. The lab is working from information it has. The practice is doing what the model requires. The problem is structural. When the designer of your teeth and the surgeon placing your implants aren't the same person and aren't even in the same building, The coordination required to catch and correct problems gets very complicated very quickly. When the design and manufacturing are in-house, there's no shipment. There's no waiting on a return. If something needs to be adjusted in the design, it gets adjusted in the same system that produced the original. The accountability loop is entirely contained. The person who designed your teeth is available for the follow-up appointment. The adjustment can happen without a 3-week cycle. The people who've gone through a fully in-house process and then later heard from friends who went through the multi-office outside lab model consistently report the same contrast. The people who experience the volleying problem describe it as the most frustrating part of the process that should have felt seamless. The people who didn't experience it often don't realize how much the other model asks patients to absorb. When the manufacturing happens in the same building as the surgery and the follow-up, you stop being a case number in a production queue and start being a patient with a treatment team that can see you and adjust in real time. Before we go further, if you're finding this useful and you want to keep getting this kind of information before your consult, hit subscribe. These videos are specifically designed to help you walk into that room knowing what to ask. If you're working through this decision right now, subscribing means you'll have access to the full picture before you sit down with anyone. That's the only ask. Subscribe, and let's keep going. Think about what the outside lab is actually being asked to do. A commercial lab receives a digital file. The file contains measurements of your jaw structure, your bite registration, and the specifications your dentist submitted. From that information, a technician who's never spoken with you and will never see you designs the teeth you'll have for the rest of your life. The conflict isn't malicious, it's structural. The lab's client is the practice, not you. The lab is optimizing for a result that satisfies the practice's submission criteria and arrives within the agreed turnaround time. Your satisfaction is downstream of both those priorities. When those priorities are in tension with what you choose, if you had more information, the lab doesn't know that. The lab can't know that. The question's worth sitting before your consult. Has the person designing your restoration ever seen your face? Will you have any input into what your teeth look like before they become permanent? If something needs to change after the final restoration is placed, who's accountable and what's the actual correction process? How many weeks does a remake actually add to your timeline? Those aren't hostile questions. They're the questions that reveal whether the model being used is designed around your experience or around the practice's workflow. The answer to all 4 of those questions look different inside an in-house digital manufacturing model than it does inside the outside lab model. There's one specific capability that the in-house model creates that the outside lab model structurally can't match. Earlier, I said there's a specific reason most practices rely on outside labs, and that has nothing to do with quality. Here's what I meant. Building a fully in-house digital manufacturing workflow requires capital investment in the equipment, investment in software, and thousands of hours of training to develop the skill set to use it at the level where it changes patient outcomes. Most practices look at that and decide the outside lab model is the more practical business decision. That's a legitimate business decision, but it's a business decision, not a clinical one. And patients are almost never told that distinction. The practices that have made the investment describe a fundamentally different relationship with their own outcomes. When I spent thousands of hours studying under some of the most experienced full arch practitioners in the world and built the in-house capability to handle surgery, design, manufacturing, and follow-up under one roof, the rationale wasn't efficiency. The rationale was that every handoff in a multi-party system is a point where accountability becomes unclear. Removing the handoffs removed the problem. Stop treating the outside lab as a given. Stop assuming that because a practice has great reviews and a confident team, the structural model they're using is designed around your best outcome. The model and team are 2 different variables. Start asking whether the person designing your teeth is in the same building as the person placing your implants. Ask whether you'll see a trial smile before your permanent restoration is made. Ask what the specific correction process looks like if something needs to change after the final placement. The answer to those 3 questions will tell you more about the model than any brochure will. Now, we're going to talk about what this looks like for you practically and the specific thing you can do tonight. Every other question you might ask in a consult touches a downstream variable. Cost is a product of how many parties are involved and what each one charges. Timeline is a product of how many handoffs exist in the workflow. Accountability for outcomes is a product of whether one team owns the entire process. The upstream variable is the manufacturing model. Everything else follows from it. Think about commissioning a piece of clothing from a tailor. There's a version of that where the tailor takes your measurements, sends the fabric and the specs to a facility across the country, and the garment comes back finished. If it doesn't fit, it ships back. If the adjustment isn't right, it ships again. There's another version where the same person who took your measurements is the one cutting the fabric, fitting it to you in real time, and making adjustments while you're standing in the room. Same final product on paper, completely different experience getting there, and completely different accountability for the result. The people who go through a fully in-house process consistently say the same thing afterward. They wish they'd done it sooner. That's not a comment about speed. It's a comment about the difference between feeling like a patient with a team and feeling like a case moving through a system. If you have a consult scheduled or comparing practices right now, here's what to do tonight. Step 1, write down the name of each practice you're considering. Step 2, for each one, search their website or call and ask directly. Is your lab work done in-house or sent to an outside facility? Step 3, if they use an outside lab, ask what's your typical turnaround time if a case needs to be remade or adjusted after final placement. And step 4, ask each practice, will I see a trial smile before my permanent teeth are made, or can I give input on the design? Step 5, compare the answers. The practice that gives you specific, confident answers to all 4 questions has built a model designed around your outcome. The practice that hedges or changes the subject has told you something important. Those 4 questions take 5 minutes to ask. They'll clarify your options faster than any amount of additional research. The outside lab model exists because building the alternative requires a commitment most practices are not willing to make. That is not a criticism. It is a fact about how the industry is structured. And it's a fact you deserve to have before you make the decision. Knowing where your teeth are made and who is accountable for them is not a technical question. It is the most personal question in the entire process. If you want to understand the full timeline of what this treatment actually looks like from the day you walk in through the day you walk out with your final teeth, the previous video covers that in detail. The link is on the screen now. Watch that one next.